Okay, smile at me. This is I am gonna have a wonderful talk. I've already had a talk about all kinds of things with her off camera. This is my interview with Canadian composer, lyricist, arranger Joanna Estelle. And we're going to be talking about her 2018, that was like yesterday, Navona CD release. And Parma does such a great job. I don't need to pitch the record companies, but Parma, which is kind of the mothership of all of these wonderful labels, does such a great job of publicity for you all. You know, the interviews and stuff. I read that fascinating interview that you gave to one of the Parma staff. Anyway, it's Navona, part of the Parma family CD release from 2018. It's called Emergence, and yeah, your first CD.
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
First commercial CD.
Ah. Okay.
I've been making CDs with my sound engineer for about the last 15 years. But what was missing was the distribution and the marketing. So that when Parma approached me about working with them, after I got over my initial fear that it was a joke, I sort of went and I met them and made sure that they were, real people. So after that happened, it's the marketing and the distribution. They are very, very good to their artists. I'm extremely grateful to be on the Parma team.
And essentially my impression, and I'm not, I just kind of know Bob and what, I'm chasing everybody everywhere, all kinds of labels, but what I get is that they are musicians. There's something about Parma that is really, I'm sure other labels as well, but the point is Parma seems unusually musician-centered, so it feels good what they do.
Also very, they're also very tuned in to the artist personally. Like for example, last year my mother passed away, and I wrote to them and I said, I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to stop working on my CD for a few months because I have to manage this. And I got a beautiful sympathy card in the mail from Parma, from Bob Lord and all the other people.
Oh, that's nice.
Totally unexpected, totally, they didn't have to do that.
Yeah,
They're very,
nice.
very personable with the artists.
Yeah. Okay, enough of this, or I'll have to charge him another $6,000 for my services. No, just kidding, nothing. Now I saw this on your Facebook, on your Skype site. Women get better with age, like a fine wine. I saw that today when I was getting ready to give you a call. And by the way, have you gotten better with age or what? Let me tell the story briefly, and then I'm going to let you have at it for those of you that are watching. I've had this experience 3 or 4 times now with various composers that I've interviewed, and it still just blows my brains out. Because I just can't imagine the kind of discipline and just strength that it takes. Anyway, Joanna, at age 40, may I say that without embarrassing you, right? 40-ish.
Yeah.
Decided, you know what? I'm enough of what I'm doing. And you were an accountant and working for the government, I guess, in that sort of capacity. And your parents, with all good intentions, had kind of encouraged you to get a real job with a real paycheck, which you'd been doing dutifully. And by the way, all that advice was very wise advice. But here's the thing that gets me every time I hear this from composers who have made this momentous decision. You just said, hey, you know what? I'm a composer. And you, I guess, took your last paycheck and went about creating a whole new world for yourself. Tell us about that.
Well, yes, I was definitely not encouraged to become a musician because good Ukrainian girls don't become musicians, So I became, I did psychology and all the other socially acceptable forms of education. And then I did corporate accounting. I was in school forever. I've spent most of my life in school. And was able to have a pretty interesting career with the Federal Public Service of Canada, which included, among other things, having the opportunity to meet Princess Diana. which is what generated one of the songs in the CD. I actually kept working till I was in my late 50s. My mother started to decline and started losing her eyesight. So at that point, it took me 8 years of part-time work and part-time study and full-time work to get my undergrad in music at University of Ottawa. So it was hard. It was a hard 8 years. And then at the end of that time, I quit government, moved several hundred miles south to become my mother's full-time caregiver, and started my master's in music at York University. So I was in my late 50s when I really sunk my teeth into, like academia music-wise. But the truth of the matter is that in the early 1990s, there were some folks in Ottawa that I respect very much, two professors from the University of Ottawa, John Armstrong and Lawrence Iwashko. And Lawrence had found out that I wrote songs. And I had all these little pieces of paper in my closet with little song lyrics on them. And one time he came over and I said, "Oh, I wrote a song for you. Do you want to hear it?" And it was called Larry Larry, which is his nickname, which he hates. But it was a beautiful song. And after I played that for him, he went, "Did you write that?" And I said, "Yes, I did, actually." And he went, "That's amazing." So he wanted to know what else I had been doing. And at that time, he was conducting a group called Cantata Singers of Ottawa, which was a pretty classy classical music choir. And John Armstrong was a professor of composition or of theory at the University of Ottawa. And he gave my pieces to John. And John did some pretty fine choral arranging, because that was before I learned how to do choral arranging. That was in the early 1990s. So I started getting involved, sort of, it was never a direct route, it was always like a diagonal. It's been an interesting road. Very diagonal. The universe has been unfolding in an interesting way for me.
Well, I'm glad you're happy about that.
I am now.
and by the way, we are talking about the choir that is on the CD, singing some of your songs. Earlier we had a chat because I didn't want to get myself in trouble, and I asked you if it was okay to call you a songwriter, and you indicated indeed it was, because this CD is a songbook. This is just an absolutely marvelous songbook. There are 10 wonderful little piano pieces at the beginning that let's just kind of deal with them right now. And I mentioned to you off camera, these to me are pieces. They're very simple. They're very beautiful. They're not complex. They're not virtuosic. They're meant, I think, and I asked you if this was okay to suggest that these are pieces that are perfect for young pianists' recitals, for kids that are intermediate level, let's say, on piano, instead of the same old Czerny exercise and so on. Here's these 10 little gems. They're a couple minutes long. Beautiful little pieces. All extremely, as I said, this is a songbook. All beautiful, beautiful songs. Period. All 10 of them.
That's very kind of you to say that. And as I said to you earlier, I would say at least half of them were kind of classical versions of jazz tunes that I wrote back in the day when I was trying to earn a living as a jazz pianist. Needless to say, I took up accounting because it didn't happen. But the pieces were good, though, And some of the other ones, the ones that are not from that period, were in response to, there's one of them called Solemne, which is kind of a response to the 9/11 bombings in New York. So each of the pieces, everything on my CD has a story behind it, and I like that.
Yeah, and a narrative, and that is exactly what songwriting is.
Yeah.
Bottom line, you're there. You're it. You got it. You may wear that songwriter title proudly, because these are beautiful, beautiful pieces. Every single one on this CD. Let's see. What I wanted to do is just have a look. We've now talked about this, making a change of life career, on top of working part-time, working full-time, taking care of your aging mom and so on. And by the way, as you know, I did it with my mom, but the point is, most all of us have these periods which are tough. you know. But when I was about 55, I was thinking, hey, it's about time to relax a little. I can't hardly imagine, plunging in as you have. You're finishing. You're working on your doctorate degree as we speak. Yeah.
Yep. At University of Sheffield in United Kingdom. That's an interesting,
Tell us.
Well, it's an interesting extension. Like, it sounds really strange, but part of the reason why I applied was that I had been a full-time caregiver for 6 years and a part-time caregiver for 6 years before that. So I spent 12 years as a caregiver. And as my mother declined about 3 years ago, I thought, you're going to have to build another life for yourself. And I thought, what is it that you would like to apply yourself to? And since I had really benefited from studying music formally, like I can write a tune without having an education in music. But what I've gotten from an education in music are the little tricks of the trade. I've expanded my ear to include sounds that I probably wouldn't have included. It's been really good for me to be involved.
And also, let's face it, the training helps one have an understanding of a beginning, a middle, an end, like a novel, a denouement,
Exactly.
a finale. Just those little things help originality.
Yes, they
Those
do.
structures.
It gives you structures from which you can, we were talking about song form. I was saying earlier that, in my opinion, song form is often berated, and it should not be, because some of the greatest composers in the world, like Schumann and Schubert, wrote songs. And in the modern era, I'm a big proponent of melody. I'm actually a student of the American composer Alice Parker, who is the grand dame of choral music in the United States. And what Alice did for me was she affirmed my belief in the importance of melody, because there's a lack of that in a lot of contemporary music. There's sound and then there's music, and for me, music includes melody. So, call me square, but that's fine.
Guess what? It's going around. Not only is that going around, but I think you'll be. What I mean is the return of melody.
I hope so.
And I like sophisticated melody. I like to have some sophisticated structures. That's fine. I'm a conductor. I like that stuff. But good, wonderful, honest, simple, beautiful, beautiful tunes, that's you. No doubt about it in my mind whatsoever. This CD has just done it. So keep at it. Because
Yeah,
I think this is it. I'm seeing a musical
Oh,
down the
well,
pipe.
yeah,
Where
we'll
can we
see.
raise the money? We'll have to talk to somebody about that.
I'm hoping films, to tell you the truth.
Much more sensible. Thank you. Makes
Yeah.
better sense. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay. Well,
because I don't want it. I don't want it to be kind of like superficial la la la.
yeah.
Like, a lot of the tunes are actually fairly deep in terms of what they're saying, and I think that the film venue gives the opportunity to express something very richly. And you can get into orchestrations and stuff like that. Like, I didn't do that on this CD because of the cost. I recorded on a cost-effective basis. That's the accountant in me.
That's very sensible.
Well,
It's easy to get carried away, I would
yes,
say.
it is. Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
But no, I would love for my pieces to be considered for films, and that's one of the objectives I would love to see happen.
Exactly right. And there's always a purpose to putting out
Hmm.
a CD. There's always a purpose. It's not just for fiddlesticks that you invest time, the 2 or 3 years, the on and on and on, the recruiting of
Yeah.
musicians, and to say nothing of the cost. So this to me, I'm just going to tell you and everybody else out there, this is a beautiful CD of songwriting. Beautiful songwriting. I kind of wanted to ask you. You did some graduate study. I can't quite find or did some extra study about spirituality. Touch on that, would you? Because it's all about your music, I think, frankly.
Yes, it is. Actually, you have to understand my background without getting really deeply into it. I grew up in a Byzantine Christian community where song where liturgy, Byzantine liturgy, was like really central to the experience of being part of this community. So like a lot of the main influences of my work are turning out to be Ukrainian folk music and arts, Byzantine liturgical music, because I used to sing in the choir, and some of the holy minimalists like Arvo Pärt and John Tavener. So when I did my master's in music at York University from 2009 to 2011, I wanted to try to, mainly for my own understanding, was to connect how music and spirituality are intrinsically connected. So I did research on that, and out of that research came a study with a fellow named Neil Douglas Klotz, who's a Sufi mystic and world-renowned author who lives in Scotland. And I've studied with Neil on and off for about 10 years. And he wrote a book called Prayers of the Cosmos, which completely changed my understanding of the Lord's Prayer.
Which is also on the CD in
yeah, I'm just giving you the background.
Yeah,
Song for Abun, because Song for Abun, that song is, there's noisy people out there.
That's my traffic outside my little apartment here in downtown Santa Barbara. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. Song for Abun was originally, the first version was for my master's thesis, and I didn't get, all I did in the master's thesis was to point out how various spiritual and religious traditions always involve music, and that music seems to be a language that transcends cultures and boundaries and all this kind of stuff, which is, everybody knows this, but I've started digging more into it because of the fact that Neil gave different translations of the original Aramaic of the Lord's Prayer. And out of it came this amazing song. For example, I won't get too deep into it, Our Father who art in heaven, which is the normal English version, actually in Aramaic can be translated as source of sound. In the roar and the whisper, we hear your name.
Wow.
Now, that doesn't get you, nothing will. I mean, I was
That just blew me away, and it told me a lot about how those early languages were changed centuries later. Yeah.
Yeah. So because
I can believe in what that statement says.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's a natural thing. It's a
yeah.
You know.
It's amazing. Like, and he talks about the original Aramaic and the roots of these words and stuff like that. So this is kind of what I want to continue looking at in my doctoral work. But what I would like to do in the doctoral work, if I can figure out, I instinctively know this goes together, but the challenge for me is trying to put it together in such a manner that the academics and the atheists won't accuse me of being crazy. But that's okay.
Well, you're looking at one, and I haven't called you crazy yet.
No.
And by the way, you just opened my eyes big time in that Aramaic translation. I'm not kidding, because to me those kind of words make cosmic sense. Whereas the modern so-called Christian Bible or Christian translations, English translations, are so stilted and dumb and maybe even subservient to something else that is not what it's about. Yes. Oh boy, are we in trouble now. Listen, okay, well, thank you for that. That's very, very interesting. And, I just want to ask you a couple things about, let me pull down into the music. I had a little browse through my, we'll just sort of touch on a couple of things. As I said, the little 10 beautiful piano pieces, I think, are just ideal for piano teachers to choose for their perhaps intermediate students. I don't think there's anything too terribly tough in there, right?
No, because I'm only an intermediate level pianist.
There you go.
If I can't play it, then I don't expect anyone else to, No, actually, the collection was, the first one, Appassionato, was, it was homework in my master's program. You were supposed to write a piece of approximately 1 minute that had an opening, center, and a closing. And it had to be a theme, and it had to be complete in 1 minute, which is kind of fun to do.
That's tough, I would say.
It was fairly tough,
Yeah.
but I was surprised that there's a pianist that teaches at York University in Toronto called Christina Petrovska-Quilico, and she actually picked this piece to include in a recital, and I was kind of surprised. So when I finished my master's, I was studying with another lady at University of Toronto called Larissa Kuzmenko, who's quite well known in Canada, and I showed her this piece, and she said, "Oh, that's really good. Why don't you write more?" She said, you know, like it's like a little vignette. So there are 10 little vignettes of things from my life, believe it or not. Some of them are kind of pathetic.
You're not supposed to say that.
Well, I'll tell you why I'm saying it's pathetic, is that one of them is about meeting someone at a dance and having a really great time with them, and at the end of the evening, it's like, yes, I'll call you, and they never phone.
Which one is that? Whimsical? No, it's probably repentant. No?
No, that's no. I don't remember.
I don't know.
But anyway.
Well, that's
all
fascinating.
All the pieces have a little story. Like on the actual score, it's really cool because I put like a little description of the vignette without giving away too much. So
You composers always do that. I mean, you never give away too much. You know what I mean? You sit back and wait and see if anybody figures things out. I think that's must be part of the fun. Let's talk a couple. Susanna's Lullaby. We're now in vocal music with let's mention Morgan Strickland, beautiful soprano, beautiful voice, and your Frédéric. Is it Frédéric Lacroix, pianist, who was there faithfully for so much on this CD. He's a wonderful pianist.
He's an outstanding, wonderful musician. I was fortunate to, because I had graduated from University of Ottawa and was quite familiar. I spent 8 years there. I mean, you know, I saw a lot of people. So I was fortunate that several of the graduates and staff of University of Ottawa, Frédéric teaches piano at University of Ottawa. Lovely person, so easy to work with, always prepared, beautiful playing. I can't say enough about him. Yeah. And yes, it does show throughout the CD.
Yeah, and by the way, he makes those 10 little piano vignettes seem easy, and they may have more going than even I'm recognizing because he plays so beautifully.
Yes, he does. Yeah.
Was there a Susanna?
Yes, there is.
Lullaby. Sorry.
Yeah, no. Actually, her it's a friend of mine who's an opera singer in London, UK, who asked me to write my first performance, believe it or not, was 1996 in London, England. And she had asked me for some music. So what I did was I wrote a piece for her called Susanna's Lullaby, because at the time she wasn't sure whether she wanted to be called Susan or Susanna as her artistic name.
Uh-huh.
So Susan Murray, yes, my friend Susan Murray, who I'm still friends with today, did the recital that included 2 of my pieces at the Canadian Embassy in London, which was pretty amazing.
Lovely. Yeah, lovely.
It was really great. I flew over there. That was the first time I was in the UK, and
well, you'd put money aside as an accountant. You could afford that trip, right?
I was very frugal in the places I stayed.
We won't go there. Okay, I'm just kidding. Well, okay. Well, I had to know, and then the beautiful dedication to Princess Diana. Can you give us a little about that, please?
I'll give you the executive summary of the story. Back in the day when I was working in the Federal Public Service, I worked for Canada's Governor General, who is like the Queen's representative in Canada. I was on his staff. It was a small staff of 130 people. And this was during the last tour that Princess Diana did with her husband, Prince Charles. They made a stop at Rideau Hall, which is where the Governor General lives. And we were all asked if we wanted to come and see her. And of course, yes. So we were all standing around in the lobby of this very historic building. And they were in 2 separate motorcades. She wouldn't sit in the same car with him at this point.
Ooh.
It was just before their separation was announced. So she came first with her entourage, and she wafted in, very elegant, extremely poised, beautiful lady. And she was, walking up the stairs, and then there was like a circle of people. And I was, sort of doing a little play-by-play in my head, and I'm saying, oh, there's the Princess of Wales, right? And then she started walking on my side of the circle, and I went, oh, the Princess of Wales is walking over this. So then she comes and she stands in front of me, and my head is going, oh my God, the Princess of Wales is standing in front of me. As if that wasn't enough, she started to cry.
Oh, no.
She started weeping, and I went, oh. And without thinking, because you're not supposed to touch the members of the royal family, she was about less than a foot. Her face and my face were less than a foot apart, and I grabbed her hand because she really needed somebody to give her a hug. And I just squeezed her hand, and I said, we really love you here, and we wish you the best, and, those kinds of things, to give her a chance to recover herself. And while this was happening, she had amethyst-colored eyes, and she shot this energy through me. It was astounding. It was like an electrical shock. And I kind of went, whoa, this is amazing. And then she gathered herself together and, went off. And I thought that was the end of it. Well, that was in fall of 1992. In the beginning of the summer in which she died in the car crash in Paris, I started writing this song in French called Qu'est-ce que c'est la vie? Had no idea what it was about. Wrote the first verse and the first refrain and thought, this is ridiculous, and put it away because I didn't know. The interesting thing was the night that she was killed in this car crash, I was sitting in my little chair in Ottawa, and they showed a film of her getting out of the taxi at the Ritz Hotel in Paris, and she turned sharply in this film, and she shot the same energy at me. And I was stunned. Wow. And I said, my God, it's her eulogy. And that's the story of behind. So what the words and the sound of this piece, I'm imagining her at the Ritz Hotel waiting for Dodi Fayed to show up. It's raining. She's looking out of a lace curtain. And that's what she's thinking about her life.
And by the way, oh, what a story. And I got shivers all over. And because as you were telling me about that look, I would, and you remember me, I'm the guy that reads newspapers and watches television. I remember all of that stuff, including that scene getting out of the cab and so on. I don't remember that look until you told me about it. But I've seen that look before, and it is penetrating, and it's a look of almost, forgive me, because I am an atheist, but the point of it, it's almost a saintly. It's so piercing. It's
piercing.
Of gratitude. I've seen her give that look when it is a look of gratitude to people who understand her. So,
yeah,
brava.
And so what happened was I was so overwhelmed when this happened to me that I was already so upset that she had been killed that I actually spent the whole week at home crying and writing this piece. So it was kind of like the purging of all of this emotion that people felt about her and the great love that they have for her and still do.
Yes, yeah. And we hear horrible things about how some people are treated by the royal family mechanism, let's say, the royal family mechanism. So, wow, what a story. Well, I think everybody gets a pretty good idea that this CD, this CD Emergence is indeed an emergence. That's all right, but also so many interesting songs on this CD. I'm thinking of Water Canticle. We should mention that the Awashko Singers, I think I did earlier, are on this CD as well. What else? Is there? I mean, you have been asked about your favorite piece on this CD. Is it still the same from the Parma interview, or what? Is there anything here that I've forgotten to bring up since we were just touching on things?
No, I still think for me, I mean, I loved writing all of them. Some of the material is new. Some of it is a complete rewrite of pieces I had written before, because like any composer, your ear changes
Sure.
and you become more technically proficient.
Yes.
So what I did was when I went back, for example, to Susanna's Lullaby, which was written in '96, I updated all of the arrangements to be a little more reflective of current reality. Like the latest one that was written on that CD, there's two. One was the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic for solo voice and cello, excuse me, which is kind of minimalist, very Arvo Pärt influenced. And I really like that piece. And the other one is a piece I wrote for my mother.
I was going to ask you about. So forgive me for shrieking at you, but I was going to ask you, and I didn't think we had time. Tell me about the piece for your mom. It's so beautiful, so moving.
The quick story is that my grandfather was a Ukrainian poet. He was also a freedom fighter, and was driven out of Ukraine by the Bolsheviks in the early 1920s. But he wrote, came to Canada, escaped to Canada, brought my mother and my grandmother and my aunt, and he spent his whole life fighting with the pen, not the sword. And he has a book of poems called Scattered Pearls in English, and in this book, he wrote a poem for me when I was 10 years old to say at Ukrainian school, because I had to go to Ukrainian school on Saturdays, This is what you did when you were a good Ukrainian kid. Anyway, when my mother, it's kind of a sad story, but it's a beautiful story. When my mother was diagnosed with cancer at the end of 2016, I wanted to give her something that would be on this CD, kind of as in honor of my mom. And so what I decided to do was I took the poem that my grandfather had written for me when I was 10 in Ukrainian, and I set it to music, and I arranged it as a duet, and accompanied by cello and piano, and made a nice quartet out of it. And we recorded it, and I'm happy to say that the last time my mother was home, which was in January of 2017, she got to hear it.
Beautiful.
That
Very moving.
Meant a lot. Yeah.
Very moving. And boy, am I glad I asked you these questions, because there's not a whole lot of information. You leave a whole lot of us for us to guess at. On the CD, what can you do except let people read the words, of course,
yes.
Which are very important. By the way, these are all your own lyrics? To
yeah.
all these songs? Yeah. I just wanted to. I forgot to ask you earlier, and I knew it, but I wanted to confirm. So. All right, here we go. We're going to end it now. I have had a wonderful talk, and by the way, revelation upon confirmation, upon glory, you made the right decision.
Oh, thank you. Well, you know what I can say? It was the right decision for me to wait, because had I tried to do music when I was in my 20s, the depth of the thoughts, the sound would not be at all what it is now. So I'm a firm believer in the ripening of the spirit, and all those experiences and like meeting Princess Diana and all this stuff, they all contribute to what I call music for adults. I write music for adults, and either you like it or you don't, and that's fine. But I'm really trying to express sound-wise and text-wise, things that are a bit on the more profound side. That's all.
Yeah.
And that's my, it's not about making money. It's about sharing quality music and thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get me so involved in your answers that I forget my next question. But I was going to try one about well, I think you've spoken to it. This is a genuine piece of artistic work. This CD, you have. How you find the energy is beyond me. It must be something in your Ukrainian blood. Also, where'd you become a poet? Well, from your grandfather, apparently, the famous Ukrainian poet. On and on it goes. Resilience from your family and its immigration, its escape from the Bolshevik. I mean, the whole story, the whole essence of the DNA slowly constructs itself into this marvelous monument that is you and your music making. I'm serious. The other thing. Oh, and I just lost it again. Oh, the other thing is, you know what? this is the way I feel about it. Even about paying the bills, sometimes things happen when they're supposed to happen.
Yes. Yes, they do.
You know?
And when I struggled with this for a long time, I used to say, why is it so late? Why is it so late? But I stopped doing that because I realized what I said a couple minutes ago. I would not be doing what I'm doing had I tried to do it sooner. You can only be who you are when you are what you are.
Yeah, absolutely. No. So it's perfect.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, I hate people with two first names. Joanna Estelle, many thanks for this conversation. You're in Toronto. I'm in Santa Barbara. It's dark for both of us, but it's later for you than it is for me out here on the West Coast. The CD Navona release 2018 Emergence. All this information is going to go up on performingartsreview.net with pictures and with audio and with links to your website and with links to the CD purchase and all the rest of it. Last words.
Can I just mention something? Two things. One is that the short versions of the stories are actually included on the Parma has a wonderful thing called the enhanced catalog, and all of the stories, short versions of what I've just said, are found there, and you can read them for yourself. The second thing I really have to say is that yes, I got my love of text from my grandfather, but I would have to say that I got my musical ear and my love of quality music, especially choral, from my late father. And the greatest joy he had as an immigrant coming to North America was to be able to listen to choral and vocal music. And it would make him cry. And I would sit, in the living room with him and listen to these wonderful songs. And they're coming out now like it's in the DNA for me. It's not like I force it, it's just in there. And that's thanks to my dad.
Well, there you go. A long extended family that continues to have an influence over its progeny and then some. Fascinating how DNA work, how things work like that. It's just amazing. Joanna Estelle, many thanks for giving me some time. And we'll chat again sometime.
My pleasure.
Let me hang up here. Okay. Bye-bye.